make sure you understand how long it's going to take to get materials and get those materials ordered ahead of time. Even if you have to rent a warehouse and just stick them in the warehouse, you do not want to get, 90% of the way through the project and then sit there and be waiting 12 months for transformers to show up.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Listen, if you're enjoying the show, do me one quick favor and leave us that rating and review. We want to hear what you love about the show, but we also want any honest feedback that can help the show work harder for your investing goals. Now, if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Andrew Brewer. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the Mastermind button today. Now, Andrew Brewer is a real estate investor and developer, and he's well-versed in all the aspects of land development. Now, Andrew has a varied background in real estate and has participated in projects as an owner, developer, operator, engineer, and consultant. He's participated in projects valued at over $200 million individually. Let's welcome to the show, Andrew Brewer.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Hey, Andrew, I went over your bio at a very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah, for sure. So I got my start in real estate basically right out of college. I did not go to college for real estate or anything related to the work I do now. I actually got a double major in history and anthropology. But after I graduated, I got a job working in a mixed use commercial residential high rise out in the Bay Area in California. This was a 27-story building. Was valued at over $200 million. I started there as a utility engineer and worked my way up to be the assistant chief engineer while I was there. And also during my tenure, we sued the original builder for construction defect and did a reconstruction project on the facility. So I was there for about 4 years, and we kind of did all that over a 4-year period. And I really just learned a lot through my job there. While I was working there, I also started investing, my W-2 wages and, the money I was making on the side into my own real estate projects, small single family homes, small multis. This was out of state. I couldn't afford to buy into anything in the Bay Area, just being, first job out of college. But I could buy properties out of state. So I was buying in Kansas City. And once stuff kind of wrapped up at that job, kind of came to a natural ending point after the reconstruction project, and decided that I wanted to go out on my own, start my own company, and really scale from there. I had all this good information and education from working in a large institutional asset with these large operators. And I just combined that with the knowledge that I had gotten from investing on my own. Like, I knew what I wanted to see from an investor standpoint. If I was going to invest my money somewhere, I knew what kind of return I wanted to see. I learned how to, structure deals, how debt and leverage worked, equity requirements, key principal requirements, guarantees, like all that kind of stuff that sponsors need to know. And I really just put those 2 skill sets together to form my company, IronGall Investments. Left my job there, moved out to Austin, Texas, which is where I am now, and started doing projects out here. A little bit after that, I formed my other company, Distance 3 Development, which is based out of San Antonio, and then IronGall Investments based out of Austin. Here I am. I'm working on projects now. We develop townhomes, multifamily apartment buildings, and single family home subdivisions. And then we also buy existing assets. So we'll buy apartments, manufactured home communities, warehouses, RV parks, anything like that. So now here I am.
I love it, man. Listen, great background there. You talked about being, graduating from college, didn't really study real estate, but ended up going out there and getting a job in the engineering space. Worked that for a number of years, took those lessons, started building your own personal portfolio, combined all of that to launch your own company, move from the Bay, and now you're out in Austin, Texas with your two companies. A couple things jumped out to me. So one, your company right now, you focus on developing townhomes, multifamily subdivisions, as well as buying existing assets, and I'm assuming renovating them and finding value add opportunities. But I want to take it back real quick because you said the first job was really being kind of a utility engineer, but you mentioned that engineering was not your background. So how do you actually get into that space, and what was that initial role like?
Yeah, so there's two types of engineering. Most people, when they hear engineer, they think of like a professional engineer that is designing things, and then somebody goes and builds it. But really, there are design engineers, and then there are like test engineers that would test things that design engineers made, and then there are operations engineers that operate the machinery that professional engineers have designed. So the field of engineering that I was in is called stationary engineering. This is a great field to get into. It's something that not a lot of people know about, but essentially it's operating all of the building systems in large commercial assets. So if you think about like a garden style apartment building, generally, you've got, a bunch of different hot water heaters, you got a bunch of different HVAC units. It's a lot of the equipment that you're dealing with is very residential. Now, if you go into like a mid-rise building or a high-rise, skyscraper, something like that, or some, kind of big, industrial building, you think like a hospital or something like that, you don't have just like a million condensing units outside that are running. You would have a commercial system. If you think, you got to have a place to put all this equipment. So if you're trying to, vent hot air, like disperse heat, like in an AC system. Well, if you're in, a high rise building, you've got limited roof space, you've got limited space around that. So you would have a large commercial system, you would have a cooling tower and a chiller. And you would have individual units in individual HVAC units in each unit, but each of those doesn't have its own condensing unit. That's where the cooling towers, the chillers come in. You don't have a bunch of different individual hot water heaters. You would have a commercial boiler. If you're in a hospital, then your boiler wouldn't only be producing hot water, it would also be producing steam, to clean things, to power things. So a stationary engineer operates, repairs, and maintains all of that type of heavy equipment, and it takes its roots back to marine engineering, which is another type of engineering that not a lot of people know about. So you think it's called stationary engineering, right? It's not stationary like paper. It's stationary in that it doesn't move. So if you think about that in terms of like marine engineering, giant ships, you think like warships, cargo ships, they have all those same type of systems, but it's a boat, it moves, right? You take all of that stuff, put it in a building, and it's stationary. And at least in California where I was, you don't have to have a degree to become a stationary engineer. It's much like a trade. You could also call it, facilities maintenance. That's another term that people use. But it's you learn on the job. So I started as a utility engineer, which is it's at the bottom, the bottom rung, and then I worked up from there. And it's on the job training, but I got to learn about all of those kind of systems. Like you don't really think about that a lot, when you go into a big building, like, oh, how does the HVAC work, how does the plumbing work? But you've got all of this massive equipment out there, and it's really run in a similar way to how stuff has been done since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. You've got steam power, you've got diesel power. Most of these large buildings are required to have some kind of emergency power systems in case like the power grid goes down. So they'll have like a huge generator that's like an entire room that could power the building for like 3-4 days on diesel power. You'll have huge subterranean tanks full of diesel fuel, and you have to, run these generators. You have to test them every month. You have to make sure that they're kept in tip-top shape. So it was really an interesting job to be in, and it's not one that that really I've met anyone else that's been in, as I've been in real estate as an operator. I haven't met anyone else that's made the switch from that space into actually investing. I'm sure there are some people out there. I just haven't met them yet. So it's kind of an interesting angle that I came into the space with.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what I was just thinking. Is like, it is an interesting area to come in. But when you think about, the being a utility engineer, facilities manager, like, you normally don't hear about people coming from those backgrounds to being a developer or leading kind of their own construction and things like that. So what was it that you saw early on or within your background that allowed you to make that transition, not just building your own portfolio on the side, but to launch your own company, to launch your own development projects, and to make this successful?
A lot of that I learned from really from doing this lawsuit. So we did this lawsuit, and then we did reconstruction on the building. So I was, or my boss and I, we were the facilities engineers. We worked hand in hand with the law firm the entire time because we were the ones with the institutional knowledge of the facility. We knew where all the problems were. We knew, exactly what was popping up. And this is what, we were going after the builder for is, we're going there, we're saying, hey, we're having all of these leaks in the plumbing, and this building isn't even 10 years old. Like, this should not be happening at this point. Clearly something went wrong. What went wrong? And then just tracing back and trying to figure all of that out. So, it was really not just operating these building systems, but going so in depth of like, why are they here? How do they work? Learning all that. And then also working hand in hand with, the property management company. The building was owned by an HOA, working hand in hand with the HOA, with the property management company, and getting a really, a good kind of like back end look at like, oh, this is how you manage a $200 million asset. This is how you manage a building, that has, 197, units in it, that's got, and that's an entire block of ground floor commercial that also has a parking garage in it. How does that business work? What is the interplay between, these tenants and the owners? And I just got to, kind of be a fly on the wall for years and seeing how all that worked, seeing how the legal worked, seeing, just all of that. And I was able to really just pull a lot of tidbits out of that, which then, really worked for, starting my own company. I understood the process behind getting the building together, what had to go into it, what it was like to, do inspections, what it was like to manage work crews, all those types of things, are what I learned. And then, when I started my development company, I teamed up with my development partner who's here in Austin, and he had developed spec homes. Like, his parents had a spec home building company. And so he had, not like big industrial experience, but, he knew the process of like, oh, you could buy land, you could subdivide it this way, you got to get these plans done. And, the two of us, we really kind of had 50% each of the equation. And when we put our heads together, we're like, hey, we have everything that we need to be able to go out and develop, like a 300 unit multifamily site between the two of us. So, we just kind of went from there,
Listen, I love it because I think it's so empowering to hear, like, as you got so close to the information, and you obviously weren't just doing your job and just responding, but you were paying attention to the conversations of the property management company, all the conversations you're having with all the key stakeholders, and learning how their business operates. What are they looking for? How do they do this? And as you're learning this, you were able to say, you know what, I think I can do this. And you were building your own portfolio on the side as well. So I presume that, as you're learning these different things, maybe you're trying out some of them, in your own portfolio, or maybe put those, in the bank and say, hey, you know what, if and when I get something bigger, that's a great process that we need to implement. Can you just talk to us more about kind of that transition? And was there a moment, was there a trigger moment where you said, okay, you know what, I need to do this within my own business. I need to go quit and launch my own job or launch my own business. Was there a trigger that led you down that path?
There were a couple triggers there, really the lessons that I was learning at my job, in terms of like equipment maintenance and stuff weren't as relevant to my portfolio because, I just had, small houses and like little stuff, very residential stuff. But, but I did put, all of that in the bank. And, I mean, you kind of, hit the nail on the head. Like I wasn't just doing my job. I was trying to learn at the same time. And that's something that I've always done. Prior to being in real estate, I was a butcher for 8 years, so I did that all through high school and college, to, pay my way through and save up some money. And, I did the exact same thing there. I just, I go in, I started as a dishwasher, scrubbing floors. But, over a couple of years, I was able to, to work my way up and, command higher pay and, better hours and everything because I got so good at that job. And it was really just through talking to people like, hey, what are you doing over there? Like, how does that work? Oh, why are you doing it that way? Like, hey, can you show me how to do that? Or even just like watching, like I'm going by like with, a brush, scrubbing the floor and I'm like watching like, oh, hey, oh, what's going on there? And I just took that same lesson. In terms of pivoting out of my W-2 job, there were a couple defining moments in that. One was I didn't go into my job with any, background knowledge, and I started at the bottom. But, there are courses that you can take in facilities maintenance, which are really good courses. You can take courses in, HVAC, refrigeration, boiler technologies, all those types of courses. And, I started taking some at, San Jose City College. They have a great program there. And, I kind of, I got a couple other job offers to go be, facilities engineer somewhere else. And I really, kind of had to make a choice, a couple years in, or I guess, about a year in of like, which trajectory do I want to be on? Do I want to stay on this, stationary engineer thing, continue to take courses, get my associate's degree in, HVAC and facilities maintenance technologies, perhaps go take another high paying job, or, cause I had offers for jobs that would have paid me more. But it would have been in a facility where there was not a construction defect litigation lawsuit happening, where there wasn't reconstruction happening. It just would have been maintenance, and it would have been a lot of just show up, do your job kind of thing, nothing really exciting. And I thought about it for a while, and eventually I just kind of made that decision, like, what, like I think I'm going to take a risk here and really try to build my the real estate side of what I'm doing, not focus so much on completing these facilities courses, not trying to get a degree there, not trying to move up the ladder. I'm just going to stay where I am. I'm going to learn more in the job that I am, even though I'm making a little bit less money. I'm going to learn more. I have more time freedom in this job, and it's going to be more conducive to eventually going out on my own. So that was one pivotal moment. And then the other was, once we wrapped up the litigation and when we wrapped up the reconstruction, I had to make a decision. Do I want to stay at this facility, and just keep working here? Or do I want to, separate here at this kind of natural ending point? There's a project ending. I can step out at this point, and it's not, I'm not going to leave anybody hanging or, leave anyone in trouble. And, it was a risk because, I didn't have anything lined up. It's not like I had gone out and was making my W-2 from my investments or anything like that. I knew it was going to be, a little bit of a bumpy road. But I thought it was the right choice. I felt like I had enough, I had educated myself enough. I had the know-how that I just needed to, get some momentum in, the projects that I was trying to do. And I realized that if I was really going to build, a successful company and develop large properties, I had to give that 100% of my focus, which is another thing. My focus had been very split, and I just couldn't afford that anymore. I needed to either, take the plunge or not, so I decided to take the plunge. And it was not without, sacrifice. It wasn't just like I did it and then, like, oh, my parents paid for everything, or, like my family moved out to Austin. We bought a big house here. So it's back in 2019, we bought a 7-bedroom house because we knew that, hey, my wife and I can live in one room, my kids can live in another, and we can rent the other 5 rooms, and that'll, more than cover the mortgage. Like, we'll cover our mortgage and all of our utilities and everything, and we'll have a little bit left over. We had a little bit of money saved. and I just kind of went from there. And I spent a lot of time saving up to be able to do that also. So it was scary, but we had to scale back a little bit too, and say, hey,
Yeah.
we're gonna live really frugally for a while until we can get this rolling. So
Andrew,
thankfully,
let me jump in there real quick, man. So appreciate the answer there. You gave a couple of really good insights that I want people to take away.
yeah,
One was you were on a path and you really stepped back to say, do I really want to just go up the corporate ladder,
yeah,
or do I want to take more control? And I think that's something a lot of people, if you're not intentionally creating the lifestyle you want, then it's easy just to wake up and do the next thing, right? Let's go for the next promotion. Let's get the next job. Let's do whatever. But you step back and you were very intentional of recognizing your situation and saying, yes, I'm going to take these classes and I can get my certifications. I continue to learn, but is this what I really want? And you looked at it and said, you know what? No, I actually want to focus on this real estate business. I think this is where I want to go. And that was the first thing you did. But then the insights now from that decision is, okay, well, what's best based on that? Well, what's best is actually staying in this position long enough for me to not try to rise up in the company. Let me stay where I'm at. I have some time flexibility. I've got some freedom. I'm learning some great things, and I can take those learnings and those lessons and I can reinvest that. And there's a book that I'm sure you've read as well, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and everyone always talks about how that got them into real estate. But there's a really important lesson in that book, and he talks about working to learn and to develop skills, not just for a paycheck. And that's exactly what you did. You stayed in that role because yes, you could have went and made more money elsewhere, but you wouldn't have had the exposure to the different assets or facets of the business that you did, especially while you work on that lawsuit. So that gave you that flexibility. I think that's really important for people to think about is sometimes it's not so much about the job, the title, the money. It's about what are you learning? What is it preparing you for the next phase of what you really want to create? And I think you did that masterfully. And then that second part was when that project wrapped, that kind of created a natural breaking point to say, okay, hey, now it's time for me to go ahead and explore something else. This thing is kind of done. I've kind of checked the box there. Let me create an environment and let me do this in a way that gives me some flexibility, moved to a big house, rented out the other rooms. You gave yourself a chance to go out there and be successful without having all the pressure in the world on yourself to be successful out of the gate. So I think that's really important and great insights for all of our listeners to take away. I want to fast forward a little bit of your journey, right? Because you've done some great development projects. And I want to get into that a little bit. For our listeners, one, just talk to us about the different projects you've done. I know you've mentioned you've done some townhomes, some multifamily, some subdivisions. Give us a little bit of a lay of the land as far as the projects you've executed.
yeah. So I've developed three, kind of like three investment models, which are townhome subdivisions and apartments. And I've done a few different projects in each. All of my development projects are around the Austin MSA right now, or I guess Austin or San Antonio. I have one down that's in the San Antonio MSA. But the first project, or the first big project I did, was an 81 unit townhome development out in Taylor, Texas. That one is still underway. We're about to break ground on it. But that one was that was townhomes, and we got in and started doing that one before Taylor kind of blew up. So it was just kind of like a dinky little town out there a few years ago. Now it's like big. Samsung's out there, and like all of
Yeah.
this business is going in there. So I look like a genius now. But that was the first one. And then townhomes, apartments are very similar. The building types are a little bit different. There's a few different regulations, but it's pretty easy to migrate from one to the other, as long as you understand the specific requirements. Single family subdivisions, like I don't build the houses. I will just subdivide and entitle the land and then sell that to a single family home builder. There are some massive single family home builders out there, like DR Horton, Lennar, and everything. I'm not at a point where I can really compete with them on building a bunch of houses. But their forte is building houses. It's not entitling land. So that's where I come in. I found like a little niche there where it's like, oh, here's something that these big guys really don't want to do. I could do it for them, and then they'll pay me. So that's what I do there. I've got a like 7 development projects, rolling, which are a mix of those. And they're tough projects to get off the ground when you're entitling land. There's not a lot of investors that want to jump in there, because they hear development's super risky, and it is. There's a risk in development like in anything else, but I personally don't find it any riskier than somebody that doesn't know how to operate a building taking a bunch of investor money and then trying to do that and it like going up in flames. And I'm sure you've seen the foreclosures that have kind of rocked the space over the last few months. Like it can happen in any asset. But I'm not sure if I answered your question there in terms of project. Like,
Yeah, I think you
like
started getting at it. Yeah, I
a
mean,
profile or like.
no, I think we got the gist, right? So basically, you've got different types of developments, right? So from apartments to some townhome communities and some other developments there. You mentioned kind of the Taylor project and entitling land. I want to talk about both of those real quick.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Taylor project first. So you mentioned, this is one that you kind of jumped into before Taylor really started blowing up with Samsung and some of these other people coming in there. Um, what does that development timeline look like? Because you started to get at the risk as well, but what does it look like? Like from the time you started this project, and I'll let you define what start the project means,
Mhm.
to being completely done, homes are there, it's finished, it's leased up. I'm not sure if you're building for lease or planning on selling them. But from the time that project is finished, what does that time frame look like?
So it depends on what stage you buy the project at and what your definition of finished is, right? So there's when you're entitling land, there's a bunch of different points that you can jump in. Like you can, there's like raw land, which is just like dirt farmland. There's land with utilities. There's zoning, there's subdividing, there's getting, an approved plat, there's getting construction plans, there's breaking ground, there's doing the horizontal work, there's doing the vertical work, there's, lease up. So it kind of depends when you jump in. I can jump in at any point in the cycle, at this point. When we started that project in Taylor, we actually bought that as fully entitled land. So it was supposed to be shovel ready, or we could just walk in, put a shovel in the ground, and start building. Unfortunately, and this was an interesting lesson that I learned in this project, FEMA, which designates flood maps, they change their maps sometimes. And if they change their maps and suddenly your project is now partially in a flood zone, it doesn't matter if it's approved or not, they won't allow you to build it. So we kind of bought that project at a really weird point. This was a couple years ago. And kind of how this works is FEMA goes through, does their studies, updates their maps, and then the cities and counties and whoever basically take FEMA's maps and add their own little specifics. They'll say like, hey, this is pretty good, but knowing our city, and from what our engineering team says, we want to make this floodplain, like a little bit bigger or, a little bit smaller, or we happen to know that, water tends to route over in this area also. So we're going to add that. And that's for the cities to make sure that they're not, that they won't approve projects that get flooded. Right. So, when we bought that project, FEMA was updating their flood maps while we were in due diligence, which we weren't aware of. We checked, hey, is this in a floodplain? No, it's not. No problems there. So they were updating their flood maps. They updated it. They sent it to the city. The city was reviewing the flood maps and coming up with their own, but they didn't tell development services or the city manager that they were updating the flood maps, because we specifically asked the city this. We're like, hey, like, we checked with FEMA, we are showing this is not in a floodplain. Is this in a floodplain? Like, do you have anything here? Oh, no, like, no worries there. And due diligence can be, pretty long when you're doing a development project. It's, it can be, 6 to 12 months of due diligence, because you have to do, a lot of third-party studies. You got to do environmental studies, flood studies, endangered species, trees, like, all the, wetland studies, whatever it is, depending on the area. You got to do all these studies. Those can take a lot of time. They can take, 2 to 4 weeks, and then you got to analyze them. And, it's a lengthy process. It's not like, buying a multifamily building where you're like, hey, I'm going to get my phase one and I'm going to go walk all the units and that'll tell me what I need to know. And I can do that in a couple of days. It's more in depth. So, so the city didn't tell us anything when we were in due diligence. It was only after we closed, we walked in for our pre-construction meeting being like, hey, we're ready to go. Like, we're about to go put our silt fence up and, roll bulldozers in there. And they were like, oh no, actually the floodplain changed and now you're partially in a floodplain. So you have to go do all this extra stuff. And we said, hey, like, well, I got the plans right here. You see that stamp where it says approved for construction? Like, I want to go and build. And they're like, it doesn't matter. This is life, fire, life, and safety. There's no grandfathering on fire, life, and safety. If this changes, like, you got to reapprove everything. So then we had to, go back and, change the site plan and reapprove everything. And that, took a lot of extra time. That approval process, whether you're starting from scratch or reapproving, it's generally 12 to 36 months, depending on what exactly you're trying to put in and based on how much the city is going to fight you. Generally, I see projects take, about 20 to 24 months. That's usually what I see, what I budget for. There's always going to be delays. You just don't know what's going to be delayed, but it's always going to be something. So whenever I'm planning, I always say, hey, my initial timeline might say 12 to 14 months. I'm just going to plan for 24 because I know something is going to come up. And I would rather tell the investors, hey, this is going to be 24 months and then it's 16 or 18 or 20 instead of saying, hey, this is going to be 14 months and then it's 18 or 20. And then, I look like a jerk. Right. So, so we went through, we reapproved everything. And now we're just about to break ground. So we were delayed on that, but our investors are still going to make, a good return on that project. They have a preferred return that's accruing. And, we're still going to, hit metrics on that, because we've done a pretty good job on it. So that, that was a learning experience on that one, but, it is still working out. Values are holding, values have gone up, construction costs have gone up. Thankfully we had enough meat on the bone on that project that even with some delays and everything, it's still going to work out, which was another, big lesson I took away from that project is always make sure there's enough meat on the bone to handle something going not the way you plan. Like, I don't like to underwrite deals where you're so close to the line or you're so close to the line on profitability that, something happens, your insurance goes up a little bit, this cost goes up, suddenly you're not hitting projections, you're in trouble. Don't make your splits with investors like so slim that you can't give up part of your pay to make them, whole or get them their preferred return or, whatever it is. When I see people do projects on like a 90-10 split or a 95-5 split, I'm like, man, you are so close to the line. I want to do something on like a 70-30 or 75-25. So like, hey, if something doesn't go wrong, like if I mess up, I can always go to my investors and say, you know what, I'm going to give you my portion. And, hey, that's, at least, I'm not making money on it if I messed it up. Right. You can't do that if you're too close to the line.
Andrew, I think that's a good way of thinking about it, both on the deal structure as well as just the way to approach the timeline and just how to manage the deal overall. Because you're talking about the time frame, when you talk about delays happen in, a lot of construction projects, right? It's not, it doesn't really matter how much experience you have. There's no way you could have anticipated that. You asked the right questions. You went to the city. You asked about the flood maps. There's not much you could do. They didn't have that information until after you closed on it. So building in some flexibility, just recognizing that no matter how prepared you are, some things like this are going to happen. So build it into your timeline, give yourself some flexibility that's going to give you the chance to still be able to deliver for your investors. So I think that's a really good way of thinking about that. For folks that want to learn more about you or your company, they can go to IronGallInvestments.com. Right now, we're going to go to a round of insights. Are you ready?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So this is our fast-paced round of questions. First one, give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
I'm not sure if I would call it a failure, but honestly, in that Taylor project, that I would chalk that up as a failure. I didn't know that fire, life, and safety wasn't grandfathered. I assumed, wrongly so, that hey, if I have this stamp on my plans, I'm good to go. They can't take that back. I can just go build. And that was not the case. And I realized that, and had to have some discussions with investors, like, oh man, like this is going to be delayed now, and your money's still tied up here, and people don't like that. But it's like I took it as a learning experience. I know to look for those types of things now. I have another project. It's a single family home subdivision where it was a similar thing. I thought I was going to be able to push through the project a lot sooner, and I ran into issues with the co-op that's providing water to the project. This is a small co-op. It's it's a rural area, and they they kind of work part-time, and they don't care about my timeline. So I've been really delayed on that project. I've had to tell the investor, like, man, I'm sorry, like this is this is taking a lot longer. But it's every time that happens, I know to look for that the next time, and I just get better and better. But because I plan in extra time and I plan in financial contingency as well, I'm able to overcome a lot of that. And and that's one of the things that I've learned. It's just like you said, no matter how much experience you have, there's always something that could come up, and there's always something new that you can learn. And I've learned not only from the from the issues that have come up to like not have that happen again, but also that like, hey, no matter what, I'm not going to know everything. These cities, these municipalities could throw something at me that I've never even thought of, and it's happened more times than than I'd like to count. But by building in that contingency into the project, you can overcome a lot of that. And that's really probably the biggest lesson that's come out of it, is like, you always need to have contingency, because something could happen, and you should probably plan for, hope for the best, plan for the worst, right? Like, I'm always planning for the worst.
There you go.
So, yeah.
There you go. That's a good way to put it. All right, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
A digital resource. I mean, honestly, I think Bigger Pockets is a great resource. I kind of started on Bigger Pockets, as I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of your viewers have, and I still think it's a great resource. You can all of the information isn't always on Bigger Pockets. I've found, like, if you're looking for the specific information, it might not be there, but you can at least find the beginning of the road, or like the beginning of that thread on Bigger Pockets. And then you just gotta chase it, and always ask questions, so that's what I love about Bigger Pockets. There's a little bit of everything on there. It's not an expertise platform for a lot of stuff, but if you want to learn about something, you can go into the forums, you can, read those threads, and, maybe connect with somebody that knows a bit more, or, get pointed to the proper resource. It's a great kind of encyclopedia, I think,
Absolutely. All right. Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
I really like Never Split the Difference. So I've read that one. That one was recommended to me. I think that one's great. Another favorite of mine is Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by Harv Eker. A lot of great insight in that book on how to change your mindset around money. He breaks down some good things like, hey, this is how wealthy people think. This is how not wealthy people think. And you have to change your frame of mind there in order to really be able to progress, and it's, I use those lessons in deciding to go out and start my own company. It was like, what is going to be a greater value? Is it going to be learning these things or making a little bit more money now? Like I had a couple years where I made less money in my job, but I've made so much more money now by realizing that investing in myself is a better investment. So there's a lot of just those types of, framing things in your mind that Harv talks about in that book. So I highly recommend that one.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
Exercising, is one, kind of clears the mind out. And also just keeping a running to-do list, so I just have, a long to-do list, and even if it's just minor stuff, email this person, follow up with this person, put this, file into this folder, even just minor stuff. I find just like writing it down frees up so much mental bandwidth. I don't have to remember all of these little things. I can just write it down, and, even if I take, 5 minutes to write the list and 10 minutes to do the tasks, like just kind of getting that, like, I can just get this out of my head. It's down on paper, and now I can focus on doing the task instead of having to remember all the tasks I have to do. So to-do lists and exercise.
Give me your number one insight for construction management.
Number one insight, well, right now, given all the issues with the supply chain, which are getting better, but they're still there, is make sure you understand how long it's going to take to get materials, and get those materials ordered ahead of time. Even if you have to rent a warehouse and just stick them in the warehouse, you do not want to get, 90% of the way through the project and then sit there and be waiting 12 months for transformers to show up. If you know that there's a 12-month lead on transformers, order them day one. Just tell your bank, I need to order these. We're going to put them in a warehouse. We're going to put them under armed guard, but, I don't want this project to be delayed. I'm going to get everything ordered ahead of time. Like, always give yourself lead time.
That's great advice right there. You're based in Austin, Texas now after moving from the Bay Area. So give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
In Austin, there's a new sushi joint that I've been going to, which I'm probably going to take my wife to for a date tonight. It's called Sushi Zoa. It's up in Hutto, so just, it's about 15 minutes north of me. But yeah, it's a great little spot. It just opened. The owner there, Jay, is a real nice guy. So that's where I've been going recently. I like that one.
All right. Sounds like a great option there. Listen, Andrew, you gave us a lot of great information talking about kind of your background, getting into kind of the facilities engineering space, and just understanding what's going on there with construction management, some of the projects you had, and all the lessons you learned early on, making that, I don't want to call it a sacrifice, but making the decision to stay at a job, make a little less money, because it created the opportunities for you to really spring forward when you launched your own firm, and you're able to do that, working on multiple development deals and growing and scaling your business. Again, for folks that want to learn more about you or your company, they can reach out at IronGall Andrew, I want to thank you again for being a great guest. Thank you for coming on Multifamily Insights, and we look forward to staying in touch. We hope you have a great day.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.